WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We're positively taking the Maryland Crab Cake Tour out on the road all summer long. We're doing 31 crab cakes in 31 days and 31 breweries because I get thirsty in August. We'll be talking about crabs and where they come from with our friends at Fadley's. Damie's going to be joining us on Wednesday down Lexington Market. I'm looking forward to that crab cake. I had a delicious crab cake from Slancha on Friday, despite the fact that we did not get the World Cup. And on Monday, really looking forward to a chat with our mayor, Brandon Scott, at Next Phase Cafe, a place where an old listener of mine runs the kitchen there from 30 years ago. A WITH listener from the early 1990s works at Next Phase. We're going to have some great conversation this week, as well as some baseball, which we've done with Luke Jones, and now about to get some football. And Luke, I don't know that we're going to be talking a whole lot. I mean, you and I can get together every week and talk about the offense and the defense and the kicking game and the new punter and like all the stuff that we've done. But let's just do a little quick recap that does not have to do with the Lamar conversation. Although that is sort of a big part of the salary cap and where they are. But I wanted to give you some oxygen to really talk about the team because you've been sitting out there last week in the heat. I showed up. The weather got better. Keith Mills showed up. It was lovely. But they're done for a while. And I don't want to say they are what they are at this point, but they're comprised and they will have more players and they will sign more veterans and things will happen and injuries will happen and all that. But right now, are they a Super Bowl contender? I guess that's my question as we clap hands and break after the mandatories.
I mean, that's such a tough question to answer any year. But when you're talking about a team that's still counting on some really significant players coming back from injury, it's hard for me to say they're a serious Super Bowl contender. I think they're a playoff team. And hey, if you look at the 2012 Ravens, they were a playoff team and very few people thought they were a serious Super Bowl contender going into that 2012 postseason. So really it does come down to, can you get in? Can you get into the tournament? And I think this team absolutely is on track to be able to do that. My big questions before I'm ready to sign off on them being at the cream of the crop, that top shelf with Kansas City, with Buffalo. I don't even put the Bengals there because they've only done it 1 year. And hey, they made the Super Bowl. Give them all the credit in the world. And I'm not dismissing their chances or how formidable they are in the AFC North, but they're another team that has questions. And I think the Ravens have very fair questions. But for me, it continues to come back to, where is Ronnie Stanley with his health? Do I think he's going to be healthy enough to play? Yeah. I want to see that he's healthy enough to be the Ronnie Stanley of old. And I think that is so important to their overall chances. And I think we can talk about left guard. We can talk about center. We can talk about Morgan Moses at right tackle and him being on the other side of 30 and just, how much of an upgrade he can be there. If you have Ronnie Stanley, all those other things that I just laid out feel inconsequential because your offensive line is just so much better. And you have so much more upside. Look at running back with Dobbins and Gus Edwards. Yes, they have some other running backs, including Tyler Beatty, their 6th-round pick, who I thought was quite intriguing watching him over the spring, catching passes and showing some juice. I think he's someone who could be a nice change of pace type guy for them on 3rd down. But you're still counting on Dobbins and Edwards to come back. And again, healthy enough to play versus healthy enough that they're making the kind of pre-injury impact that they were capable of making. And that's where you just have unknown. Marcus Peters at corner, another example of it. So there's just, for me to answer this in mid-June, I need to see a little more clarity on where some of these injury guys are in terms of they're going to practice and they're going to be on the field in training camp. I'm not suggesting that they're going to miss the season. And John Harbaugh was very positive in what he said about Ronnie Stanley, but until they're on the field and you see what they look like, again, healthy enough to play is not the same thing as healthy enough to thrive and be that same difference maker. So that's where I'm not quite ready to put them in the top tier of AFC contenders, but I certainly look at them as a playoff team. And right now, and I even said this right after the schedule release, and I did my first blush prediction, I did pick the Ravens to win the division, edging Cincinnati ever so slightly, because I think the Bengals are going to find life's a little bit tougher when you're not sneaking up on people anymore, as the Ravens have learned in the
Browns.
past.
I know that much. And probably nobody's picking the Steelers because of the quarterback situation. So, it is a different kind of the toughest division in football and all that stuff. I don't know. The Browns feel like they are dancing on the edge of chaos. Maybe it's time to get Jason Cole on the show. The Browns certainly feel that way to me. They feel like there ain't no way they're winning with this mess. And the Steelers, I always defer to Tomlin and to the organization and the way they do things. But I do look at this and say, we're all chasing the Bengals right now until further notice.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think you have to, just out of respect to what they did last year. But at the same time, you're not talking about a team that's been at the top of the mountain for multiple years, like Kansas City in the AFC West, for example. It's not quite like that. So, but yeah, as much as I wouldn't discount what Pittsburgh can do any given Sunday, and even the Browns, I mean, as much as, quarterback, I don't even know what to say. I mean, it's just that ridiculous. But that is a team that does have a lot of talent with the rest of their roster. So those aren't teams that you can just show up and just expect to win. They're not going to be that. I just don't see those two teams having the same level of ability to consistently win like the Ravens or the Bengals will be able to do in 2022. I think the Ravens and the Bengals are teams that I say can win 11 or 12 games. Pittsburgh, I think they're more 500-ish just because of the quarterback situation. I mean, hey, if the rookie comes in week 5 and does a good job for them, then hey, maybe they can be a wild card team. Cleveland, I mean, the more and more it sounds like Deshaun Watson going to be suspended for the year, or at least that's going to be what the league is aiming for. If you saw some of the reports,
talk about the mess here with the contract, right? Like, we're not sure that Lamar is going to show up for practice, right? He's not sure, right? He said that in front of everybody last week, that if this turns into you're going to give me $200 million or I'm not going to play for $22 million, right? That's a sentence on Lamar, and that's pretty much where we are, right? Like, if Lamar's decided he's not going to play without a contract, then he's going to go fight with the Ravens in August, and we're going to have all hell break loose here, and things aren't going to go well here. That's another reason to not bet on the Ravens right now, is because of some of the uncertainty. And I should say bet on the Ravens. Bet. It's what we're doing now. We're all betting, right? So I'm not betting, but you're betting. Everybody else is betting. I remember back when they would throw me out of a locker room for talking about betting. Now I put Jack Radio on and I hear Chris Collinsworth reading FanDuel ads. So it's crazy. But if you were making a bet on the Ravens, and that is their dearest, darkest hope, is that you will bet on it, of course, because that's their industry at this point, that you would look at it and say, well, Lamar's a question mark at this point, not only physically, right, because of the injuries last year and where are we with Ronnie Stanley and all these other things that the Ravens have going on, but will Lamar be on the field against the Jets on September 11th, happily, healthily, under a contract he can live with, whether that's this $22 million, which is, $1.3 million a game or whatever it's going to break down to this year, or whether it's going to be $2 million a game and guaranteed money, and whether the Ravens are going to do that or not, and where he's getting his advice. So Lamar has the ability to completely destroy the Ravens season by not showing up, right? And the Ravens then would have a gun held to their head saying, well, if you want to compete this year, you better sign him. So that's what Eric is going to vacation with here at this point. The Browns are in a whole different place, right? I mean, the Browns are in is Baker Mayfield willing to show up and play the role and do the things that he's done in the past? Does he want his next gig? Does he want out? They need him in. Clearly, they need a quarterback at this point. I mean, you talking about what the idiot owner of that franchise did, same idiot stuff he was doing back when Pettin worked for him, and, like all of that. Just deciding to go get this troubled, at the very least, quarterback, give him the biggest contract in the history of the league, pissing off everybody, screwing up negotiations for the Ravens and any Joe Burrow and anybody else down the line. The Browns have been the prime mover of the entire offseason by doing this, really.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with that. And I mean, we can talk about the contract itself, whether they had given it to Deshaun Watson or if they traded for some other quarterback, if they had been the ones to trade for Russell Wilson, for example. I mean, we could certainly debate the merits of that, but to give that contract then to someone who is, you were very kind in how you described Deshaun Watson, but someone who clearly has an extraordinary amount of trouble off the field, and certainly not empathizing or sympathizing for him. This is all of his own doing. But to do that and to not even know if you're going to have him for 2022 on top of that. And who knows what happens from here moving forward. But yeah, I mean, it leaves them in such a position. Everything you mentioned about Lamar Jackson, look, if Lamar doesn't intend to report for training camp, I don't know why he showed up for mini camp. You know what I mean? Like there's still an element to this of what I actually think he's going to do. What he said, what he meant, all the open for interpretation stuff we already got into, and we don't need to rehash that too much. But there's still a sense of when Lamar shows up and plays, you know what you're going to get, right? I mean, and he'll be fine. He's healthy. I mean, it was a bone bruise in his ankle. It wasn't some catastrophic question mark from a long-term standpoint. But
I've
you look
always
at
got questions about him playing 18 weeks.
I
always, just because
sure.
of the way he plays the game, I would bet against it. If I'm going to bet on it or against it, I would bet against him being healthy on January 10th of any given year, just because of the way it is. And I said that the day they drafted him. I can't get off of that, and I can't get off of that after a year when he's been hurt and didn't play in November and December, and now wants a record contract. I mean, it is very incongruent, and it isn't easy. It's a science, it's an art, it's all of those things that Eric talks about, but it is debilitating to the organization right now all the way around that he's not signed, that there is some uncertainty, and that you and I are sitting here in June saying, is he going to play for 22 million, or is he going to be that guy? I don't know what he's going to do. I really don't. I think he's going to play for 22 million because that's what you and I would do, but he's wired differently, clearly.
Well, but I would also say I would be pushing to not play for 23 million. I'd be pushing to get a new deal. I'd be pushing to negotiate and say what you want and go through that whole process. And again, this goes back to what we talked about, that how did those talks go? Was it a very superficial conversation and nothing changed? Or was it a case of they talked a little bit in terms of dollars and they said, okay, we're going to talk again in a couple of weeks. We're going to talk again 2 weeks before training camp. We're going to talk when you report. And there's that little buffer time when the quarterbacks and some of the injured players show up a little bit early. And we're going to try to get something done by August 15th, and we'll set that as a soft deadline to try to get this done before the season starts. So it's not a distraction. So, if that kind of conversation happened last week, then we're talking about a much different situation here. If they had a very superficial, brief conversation that didn't really go anywhere, I'm not saying it was acrimonious, but if it just wasn't constructive in any way, then, I guess there is a little more certainty based on what he said, even though I still don't know if that was more just
the football world thinks he should go in and ask for $232 million and not play for a nickel less and hold out until he gets it. And I just gave you a sentence there. There's the Jerry Maguire right there. Dude, if you want the biggest contract, if you don't want to play, if you don't want to get injured playing for $22 million this year, have your leg snapped in half and you never get paid, then do it this way. They offered you $80 million last year. You didn't take it. Now all of a sudden 80's turned to 230 because you won't take 120. You won't take 150 because the last guy didn't, right? Like literally, if that's where the market set is, then Bisciotti's got to get on his leave the Bahamas, wherever the hell he is, Jupiter, go down to South Florida, talk to Lamar and his mother and figure it out. Otherwise, to your point, Lamar shouldn't get on the field for $22 million. I mean, you tend to take the player side a little bit more. I tend to take the management. That's cool. But somewhere, there is no middle in this. There is no $130 million midway once the $230 million thing is there. He's either going to get the market or he's going to take a below market deal at this point because the market has just – it's moved. Ask Andrew Brandt. Ask anybody that does this for a living, right?
Yeah, and that's where you would look at it through the lens of him waiting. He's done well for himself in that way. I mean, if Josh Allen had waited another year,
he had been hurt and didn't show up for practice, and hasn't been on the field since Halloween, and he wasn't very good last year. They were okay.
He was really good early. He struggled in the middle of the season.
And he struggled in the middle of the season before that. And he struggled at the end of several seasons. So we could talk about all of that, but he hasn't touched the football, and he's already made $100 million more. Like literally, he hasn't touched the football in any way, and he's made it, to your point. So time is his friend. There's no doubt about that. Time's not Eric's friend right now. If you really believe he's your franchise guy and you're going to win a Super Bowl or go to 2 of them before he's 30, if you really believe that, then Steve better get the Brinks truck out for him and say, you all in? We're all in. We own you till you're 30. Here's $250 million guaranteed. You're our quarterback. There is nobody else. And they're going to have to do that, I guess. The more I think about it, the more I think that's what they're going to have to do. And that's not very Ravenish. It's not.
Well, but it comes down to it. we've talked about how unique this is and how they've built their roster around this guy, and they've changed their. I mean, think about it. They've been all in because they did something that was zigging while everyone else zags, right? I mean, we've talked about that, and they've won a lot of football games doing that in the regular season, going back to 2018. So that's where I keep looking at this, and you just said it. If you're thinking there's going to be a middle ground here, you kind of feel like, wouldn't they have already found that already at this point? I mean, we're a year plus, we're 14, 15, 16 months into having this conversation to some degree or another, whether we're talking about skipping OTAs or whether we're talking about, Josh Allen's deal or Dak Prescott's deal. Now we're talking about other guys, and we're of course talking about the Watson deal. That's changed everything. It felt like a sea change to me, as I said, for Lamar, for Kyler Murray, for Justin Herbert, for Joe Burrow. I mean, go down the list of whichever young quarterbacks you love, and I've already shown plenty of promise. So, I mean, it kind of is what it is in that way. And it's why I've said you might hate the idea of giving him the kind of deal that the Browns gave to Deshaun Watson, but you either need to suck it up or realize you might lose him then. I mean, that's just
or
that's
he might not
right.
walk onto the field this year for $22 million, because the thought was, well, screw Lamar, he'll play. He's got to play. It's $22 million. He's under contract. Yep. It's the Players Association agreed to this. We drafted him in the first round to have this ability to do all of this. Now, getting him to the field and getting him into the facility 3 weeks ago wasn't easy, right?
Yeah. Well,
they didn't get it done. So there is no kumbaya at this point. This is a conversation, but it's more than a conversation. It's a conversation over $250 million.
Yeah, it's important, and it's delicate because he doesn't have an agent, and we've talked about that. And look, I mean, again, that's his right. What Lamar is doing, he didn't have to show up at OTAs. It is voluntary. He doesn't have to have an agent. But when you're talking about some of these circumstances, it does lead to a unique situation, and that's where it was good to see that they did have some communication in regards to the contract. Now, it's easier when he's in the building, right, as opposed to being in South Florida or being out in California, as he was working with Adam Dado as a private quarterbacks coach earlier in the offseason. But, again, how productive, how constructive were those talks? And, I think time will tell, and we'll see if they get a deal done before training camp, if they get a deal done before the season starts, or this will drag out. Again, if you're asking me what I think is going to happen, I think he will play under his current contract if they don't get anything done, because again, if he's going to hold out in training camp, I don't know why he showed up for mandatory minicamp, right? I don't know why there's already these firm plans in place for him to get together with his receivers and tight ends, all of them the way it sounds, the way John Harbaugh made it out to be down in Florida before training camp starts. Those to me, those pieces of evidence sound like someone who is going to play and is going to show up for training camp, and might not be thrilled about the fact that he's, in the last year of his deal, but wouldn't be the first guy that's been in that position before. So, again, we're speculating about it, and time will tell. And, but we can talk about all these other issues. And, I already mentioned Ronnie Stanley's health being so critical, Marcus Peters, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards. But yeah, of course. And again, if you're going to work under the assumption that there is some uncertainty about Lamar showing up, which I think's overblown again, just my personal take on that. But he said what he said. And until you see him with 100% certainty, there'll be a little bit of, at least a morsel of doubt there until you're seeing that team video of him rolling up.
If he comes out and says out loud, I'm playing either way, then the Ravens know they don't need to negotiate with him.
Yeah, well, sure, exactly. So anytime this is a negotiation. Both sides are trying to win a negotiation. And again, will there be some middle ground? Maybe there will be, but based on the fact that it has stretched out as long as it is, it's where you lead yourself to believe that maybe not. And that's why a lot of people have said they expect him to play, out his rookie deal. And we'll be talking about the franchise tag at 9 months from now at this point. So, we'll see. Again, these things can change very quickly, though. We've seen that happen in the past as well.
He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke Jones. You can find him out on the interwebs, anywhere the interwebs travel, from Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, and for sure Instagram. I've been Instagramming the Nasty Nestor bus trip that doesn't exist, but I'd love to make exist on Friday up to Yankee Stadium. A little baseball, a little football, certainly baseball in action. I am picking up the residue on the World Cup failure of the Baltimore-Washington contingent to land games. My disappointment in this thing, that's probably going to last, the rest of my life. Kind of like when Harbaugh said the Billy Cundiff miss, forever. That we didn't get the World Cup around here, but I am investigating. We got the Maryland Crab Cake Tour this week at Next Phase Cafe on Monday with Mayor Brandon Scott. On Wednesday, we'll be at Fadley's with a bunch of guests. All of it brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery in conjunction with our friends at Goodwill Industries and our newest sponsor, Window Nation, where you buy two and you get two free. I am Nestor. He is Luke. We cover the Ravens. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore positive in Lamar Jackson's contract.